You did not find this by accident. You felt pulled here because something has shifted, not around you, but through you. You have sensed it in rooms you cannot explain, in conversations that feel different, in the way certain people react when you say nothing at all. You are not imagining it. You are not being dramatic. You are awakening to authority. You were never ordinary. You were never built to blend in. You were marked before they misunderstood you, marked before they rejected you, marked before they tried to shrink you. And now something is changing. The warfare feels different. The tension feels different. Even the silence feels different. Why? Because your frequency has risen. And when your frequency rises, it does not ask permission. It governs. There are 9 marks that reveal this shift. 9 confirmations that your spiritual frequency is no longer surviving their world. It is influencing it. Not everyone will understand this. Only the chosen recognize this pattern. Only those who have endured isolation can recognize the sound of spiritual authority forming. Listen carefully. If this resonates in your spirit, if you have felt this shift but could not name it, then you already know. This message was assigned to find you. Stay with me. Lean in. This is not content. This is confirmation. First, Mark 1. Their energy shifts the moment you enter the room. You have felt this. You walk in and something changes. The air tightens. Voices soften. Postures adjust. Those who once tried to dominate you grow uneasy, and they cannot explain why. They used to speak over you. Now they measure their words. They used to project confidence. Now they fidget. You do not even have to speak. Your presence is enough. Understand this. This is not intimidation. This is spiritual weight. There was a time when you felt small in those same spaces. A time when their tone cut deep, when their sarcasm lingered, when their control felt suffocating. You remember it. You questioned yourself. You wondered if you were too sensitive, but you were not weak. You were becoming. And while you were healing in silence, your frequency was rising in power. Now your calm disrupts their chaos. Your silence exposes their insecurity. Your steadiness unsettles their manipulation. This is psychological and spiritual at the same time. On the surface, they feel uncomfortable because you no longer react the way you used to. You are not feeding their ego. You are not absorbing their projections. But beneath the surface, something deeper is happening. Darkness recognizes when light matures. The enemy recognizes when authority awakens. Your nervous system is no longer triggered by their tactics. And when you stopped reacting, you stopped reinforcing their control. Do you see it? The atmosphere adjusts around you now, not because you demand it, but because you carry it. Your energy no longer seeks approval, it carries alignment. Your spirit no longer negotiates, it stands. And those who once tried to overpower you feel that shift in ways they cannot articulate. They sense the change. They feel the loss of dominance. They experience the reversal. This is the first mark. You are not entering their reality anymore. They are entering yours, and this is only the beginning. Second, Mark 2. Their attacks now collapse before reaching you. You have noticed it. The words still come, but they do not land. The tone is still sharp, but it does not pierce. Have you felt that the same voice that used to echo in your mind for days now fades within minutes? The same criticism that once unsettled your sleep now dissolves before sunset. You are not numb. You are fortified. There was a time when their words shaped your self-image, when one accusation could shake your confidence, when manipulation wrapped itself around your emotions and you questioned your own reality. You remember that version of you, hyper-aware, overthinking, trying to defend yourself. But something shifted. Now when they try to provoke you, the strategy exposes itself. You see the insecurity behind the insult. You see the control tactic behind the concern. You see the projection behind the accusation. It reveals itself before it roots. This is discernment, earned through warfare. The enemy still attempts. Darkness does not retire quietly, but the difference now is penetration. It cannot enter what it used to occupy. You have closed the door, not with bitterness, with authority. You did not harden your heart. You strengthened your spirit. That is the revelation. The warfare still exists, but it no longer governs you. It circles you. It observes you. It attempts to test you, but it does not own you. And that shift terrifies what once controlled you. Because when attacks fail, power dynamics change. They may still speak, but their words now feel empty. They may still attempt manipulation, but it feels transparent, like watching someone try to cast a shadow in a room filled with light. You see it before it forms. That is growth. That is spiritual elevation. What once destabilized you now sharpens you. Every attempt refines your discernment. Every failed attack confirms your evolution. You are no longer reacting from wounded identity. You are responding from healed authority. Do you understand what that means? It means you have outgrown their weapons. And when a weapon loses its effect, the wielder loses influence. This is not coincidence. This is frequency dominance. Your nervous system is no longer wired to fear their tone. Your mind is no longer programmed to internalize their projections. Your spirit no longer confuses noise with truth. You stand, calm, untouched. And that calm is louder than their chaos. Let them try. Let them speak. You remain unmoved because you finally see the pattern. You recognize the warfare, and recognition breaks enchantment. This is the second mark. The attacks collapse mid-air. The enemy swings at air, and you stand firm, stronger, clearer, higher. And if this is happening, then understand something greater is unfolding. Because when attacks fail repeatedly, escalation comes, which means what comes next will reveal even deeper authority. Third, Mark 3. They begin mirroring the confidence they once mocked. Look closely. The very traits they criticized in you are now appearing in them. The boldness they called arrogance, the independence they labeled rebellion, the vision they dismissed as unrealistic. Now you see fragments of it in their posture, in their language, in their decisions. Have you noticed they borrow your tone? They adopt your calm. They attempt your steadiness. The same fire they tried to extinguish, they now try to imitate. This is not flattery. This is reversal. There was a time when your confidence threatened them, when your clarity exposed their insecurity, when your refusal to shrink disturbed their illusion of control. They laughed. They minimized. They questioned your sanity. But what they were really confronting was unfamiliar authority, and authority unsettles the unprepared. Understand this. When darkness cannot destroy the light, it studies it, quietly, strategically. Your resilience became their case study. Your recovery became their reference point. They watched you survive what was meant to silence you. They observed you rebuild what they tried to dismantle. They witnessed you stand back up without applause. And something in them shifted, because strength that endures warfare becomes undeniable. You were the rejected stone, overlooked, misjudged, cast aside. But now that same stone is becoming the foundation they measure themselves against. You did not change for their approval. You evolved through adversity. Every insult sharpened you. Every betrayal clarified you. Every isolation season fortified you. What they thought would weaken you refined you. And refinement radiates. Now when you speak even softly, it carries weight. When you move even quietly, it draws attention. They sense your authority even if they never confess it. You feel it in the way they pause before challenging you, in the way they watch you more closely than before, in the subtle adjustments they make in your presence. This is not ego. This is evidence. The world mirrors what it cannot ignore, and they cannot ignore you anymore. The confidence they mocked has become the confidence they attempt to replicate, but imitation is not possession. They can copy your posture. They cannot duplicate your anointing. They can mimic your words. They cannot manufacture your frequency, because yours was forged in fire. Yours was carved in isolation. Yours was sealed in warfare. And that kind of authority cannot be borrowed. It must be earned. You earned it. Through tears they never saw, through prayers they never heard, through battles they never understood. This is the third mark. You are no longer the underestimated one. You are the example, the standard, the quiet blueprint. And if they are beginning to mirror you, it means your influence has crossed an invisible threshold, which means what shifts next will not be subtle. It will be undeniable. Fourth, Mark 4. Silence from you produces anxiety in them. This is where it turns. You stopped explaining. You stopped defending. You stopped clarifying yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. And suddenly, they became restless. Have you seen it? The double texts, the subtle check-ins, the indirect comments meant to pull you back into reaction. Your silence unsettles them. Why? Because your withdrawal feels like judgment. Not because you condemn them, but because you no longer compete for their approval. There was a time when you tried to fix every misperception, when you carried conversations on your back, when you fought to be seen clearly. You chased clarity, you chased peace, you chased resolution, and they fed on that pursuit. Your need to be understood kept you entangled, but now you embody clarity. You do not chase it, you are it. And when you stop chasing, the dynamic collapsed. They are watching you more closely than you watch them. Study that. The ones who claim superiority now monitor your moves. The ones who dismissed you now track your growth in silence. Why? Because detachment shifts power. When you withdraw emotionally, spiritually, energetically, the illusion of their dominance dissolves. They thrived when you reacted. They felt strong when you explained. They felt important when you pursued. But your silence exposes insecurity. Your silence communicates, I am no longer available for this cycle. And that message is louder than confrontation. Darkness cannot manipulate what it cannot access. You closed the door without slamming it. You walked away without announcement. You released without drama. And that calm departure carries spiritual weight. They feel it. They feel the distance. They feel the loss of influence. They feel the shift in hierarchy. Because silence from the chosen is never weakness. It is warfare strategy. You are not isolating out of pain. You are separating out of alignment. There is a difference. Isolation was your training ground. Calling is your elevation. And now your quiet presence speaks more than your arguments ever did. You no longer need to correct narratives. Truth corrects itself over time. You no longer need to prove your growth. Growth radiates. And the more you detach, the more their anxiety rises. Not because you harmed them, but because they can no longer reach you the same way. That access is gone. That emotional leverage is broken. That control point has expired. You are unreachable in the ways that once made you vulnerable. This is the fourth mark. Your silence governs. Your detachment destabilizes. Your stillness intimidates. And if your quiet has this much impact, imagine what happens when your favor becomes visible. Fifth, Mark 5. Circumstances begin bending in your favor publicly. This is where it becomes visible. Not just internal, not just energetic, visible. Doors that were once shut in your face begin to open without struggle. Invitations arrive from places that once ignored you. Opportunities surface in rooms that used to diminish you. You feel it. The shift is no longer subtle, it is strategic. There was a season when rejection followed you like a shadow. When you knocked and nothing moved. When you offered your value and it was overlooked. You questioned yourself. You wondered if you were delayed. But you were not delayed. You were being positioned. Listen carefully. When favor is forming, it often hides behind isolation. When destiny is building, it often feels like exclusion. When your frequency is rising, it often looks like rejection. But rejection was never denial. It was redirection. Now the same spaces that tried to minimize you are creating room for you. The same environments that overlooked you are acknowledging you. The same systems that resisted you are adjusting to you. And people are noticing. Witnesses see the reversal. They remember how you were treated. They remember who dismissed you. And now they see elevation, not arrogance. Elevation. You remain humble, but the shift is undeniable. Favor is no longer hidden in private growth. It is manifesting in public outcomes. Understand this. When divine favor becomes strategic, it rearranges structures. It moves pieces you did not touch. It opens conversations you did not force. It creates access you did not beg for. This is not luck. This is alignment. The warfare you endured was not random. It was resistance to what you carry. And now that what you carry is rising, circumstances must cooperate. Do you see the power awareness here? You are not just surviving oppression, you are outgrowing it. You are not just healing privately, you are being established publicly. Darkness tried to confine you to a narrative, but favor rewrites narratives. The world begins to adjust to your frequency. People who once doubted you now reference you. Platforms that excluded you now invite you. Environments that felt hostile now feel cooperative. Why? Because your internal authority has matured. And when internal authority matures, external reality responds. You are witnessing governance, not control through force, influence through alignment. This is the pivot. You are no longer reacting to circumstances. Circumstances are responding to you. Let that settle. You carry something that bends outcomes, something that redirects rooms, something that shifts dynamics without announcement. And the more visible this becomes, the more uncomfortable it will make those who opposed you. Because public favor exposes private resistance. This is only the fifth mark. If doors are opening now, wait until authority is recognized. Sixth, Mark 6. Their authority feels artificial in your presence. You can feel it now. The titles do not impress you. The loud voices do not intimidate you. The positions they once used to tower over you now look fragile. Have you noticed they speak longer? You speak shorter, yet the room leans toward you. You do not raise your voice, yet your words land heavier. This is not ego. This is weight. There was a time when their status made you question yourself, when their confidence felt overwhelming, when their platform seemed untouchable. You thought they were powerful, but what you were sensing was volume, not depth, noise, not substance. Now that your frequency has matured, you can discern the difference. True authority does not shout, it stands. True authority does not scramble for validation, it radiates certainty. And when you enter the room, their authority begins to feel rehearsed, forced, overcompensated. They attempt to assert control, but it feels thin. They repeat their credentials. They emphasize their position. They remind everyone who they are. Why? Because your presence is challenging what they built on insecurity. You do not have to confront them. Your maturity does it for you. Spiritual maturity is dangerous to artificial power because it exposes it. You endured seasons of silence. You were overlooked. You were underestimated. But those seasons were not punishment. They were preparation. You were being rooted, grounded, stabilized. While they were building image, you were building substance. While they were chasing influence, you were cultivating integrity. Now the contrast is undeniable. Light does not compete with darkness, it reveals it. And your calm steadiness reveals where they are unstable. They feel it. That subtle shift, that unspoken comparison. You do not seek authority, you embody it. And embodiment unsettles imitation. The enemy loves counterfeit power, loud, flashy, demanding attention. But counterfeit collapses under real weight. And you carry weight now, earned through warfare, forged through isolation, strengthened through rejection. Every battle refined you. Every betrayal matured you. Every delay deepened you. So when you stand beside someone who built their authority on fear or control, the difference vibrates in the atmosphere. You feel grounded. They feel threatened, not because you attack, but because you exist. And existence at your level is confrontation to insecurity. This is the sixth mark. Their authority feels artificial because yours is authentic. You no longer measure yourself by their titles. You measure yourself by alignment. And alignment is untouchable. Let them speak loudly, you remain steady. Let them posture, you remain rooted. Because the more secure you become, the more exposed artificial power will feel. And if their authority feels hollow now, wait until they begin seeking yours. Seventh, Mark 7. They seek your insight in areas they once undermined. This is where it becomes undeniable. The same people who questioned your judgment now ask for your perspective. The same voices that dismissed your wisdom now lean in for your advice. You have seen it. The shift from public opposition to private messages, from criticism in the open to consultation in secret. Have you felt that tension? They do not announce it loudly. They approach carefully, quietly, because asking you for guidance forces them to confront something. They misjudged you. There was a time when your ideas were ignored, when your discernment was labeled overthinking, when your spiritual sensitivity was called dramatic. They undermined you. They minimized you. They attempted to silence you. But what they did not understand is this: you were not unstable. You were aware. You were reading atmospheres they could not see. You were sensing shifts they could not detect. You were aligned while they were distracted. And now their systems are failing. The strategies they relied on are collapsing. The confidence they projected is cracking. And suddenly, they remember your clarity. They remember how you saw patterns early. They remember how you warned gently. They remember how you endured without losing yourself. So they come back, not with applause, with questions. And here is the revelation. The student becomes dependent on the one they tried to silence. Feel the weight of that. They now seek stability from the one they tried to destabilize. They now seek insight from the one they tried to discredit. They now seek direction from the one they tried to confuse. This is not coincidence. This is governance. Your frequency is no longer reacting to their reality. It is correcting it. You are not just spiritually protected. You are spiritually established. And establishment changes dynamics. You no longer speak to be heard. You speak because you are certain, and certainty carries gravity. They sense it, that grounded calm, that unshaken presence, that quiet knowing. And when their own clarity fails, they reach toward yours. Not everyone will admit it publicly. Pride resists confession, but energy does not lie. They lean in, they watch, they ask, because deep down they recognize something. You carry answers forged in fire. You carry discernment sharpened through betrayal. You carry wisdom earned through isolation, and wisdom earned in darkness shines brighter than borrowed confidence in light. This is the seventh mark. You are no longer the underestimated voice in the room. You are the reference point, the anchor, the stabilizer. And if they are beginning to depend on your clarity, then the next shift will not just involve advice, it will involve alignment. Eighth, Mark 8. Their reality begins reflecting your internal victory. This is deeper than behavior. This is structural. You cultivated peace in private. You wrestled with your wounds in silence. You faced your shadows when no one applauded you. And now that internal victory is no longer hidden. It radiates. Have you noticed how your calm unsettles their chaos? You walk into spaces that used to trigger you, and instead of reacting, you remain steady. Instead of absorbing tension, you diffuse it. Instead of shrinking, you expand. Your peace destabilizes what feeds on disorder, because chaos needs participation, and you stop participating. That is power. There was a time when their dysfunction hooked into your unhealed places, when their patterns triggered your fears, when their tone ignited your insecurity. But you did the work. You healed. You confronted your own darkness so it would not control you. And now your healed identity confronts their unhealed patterns. Without effort, without speeches, without confrontation, just by existing. They are not reacting to your words anymore. They are reacting to your transformation. That glow, that steadiness, that emotional regulation they cannot manipulate. It irritates what is still broken in them, because light does not attack darkness. It exposes it. You do not need to argue. Your alignment speaks. You do not need to defend. Your stability reveals. The battlefield has shifted. It is no longer about external conflict. It is energetic dominance. You mastered yourself, and when you master yourself, you change the field. Their moods no longer control the atmosphere. Your presence does. Their projections no longer rewrite the narrative. Your clarity does. Do you understand the gravity of this? You are no longer surviving in their world. Their world is adjusting to your internal order. This is why some react unpredictably now. Your peace feels like confrontation. Your confidence feels like accusation. Your detachment feels like exposure. Not because you harm them, but because your internal victory highlights their internal warfare. And here is the revelation. When your internal alignment becomes strong enough, external resistance begins to collapse without force. You are not fighting harder. You are vibrating higher. You are not arguing louder. You are standing firmer. And firmness at your level shifts reality. This is the eighth mark. Your transformation is rewriting dynamics. Your healing is reshaping hierarchies. Your internal victory is governing external outcomes. You are spiritually dangerous now, not because you attack, but because you are anchored. And when someone becomes anchored in truth, chaos loses leverage. Feel that, hold that, because what comes next is not subtle, it is irreversible. Ninth, Mark 9. They realize too late that you are the standard now. This is the irreversible shift. There comes a moment when denial collapses, when comparison ends, when resistance exhausts itself, and they see it. You are not competing anymore. You are defining. Their influence no longer shapes the narrative. Yours does, quietly, powerfully, permanently. You remember when their opinion felt final, when their approval felt necessary, when their rejection felt defining. But look now. Their words no longer carry authority over your identity. Their perception no longer determines your value. Their hierarchy dissolved without announcement. You did not overthrow it, you outgrew it. And that is more dangerous, because when you outgrow a system, it cannot reclaim you. What once oppressed you now orbits your frequency. Feel that. The same energy that tried to suppress you now adjusts to you. The same environment that tried to contain you now reorganizes around you. You are no longer surviving their reality. Their reality is adjusting to yours. Do you understand how final that is? This is not ego. This is spiritual order. Light was never meant to bow to darkness. It was meant to expose it. And now your presence establishes a new standard. How to move, how to respond, how to endure, how to rise. They measure against you, even if they never say it, even if pride keeps them silent. They know. You carry something that cannot be reversed. You carry maturity forged in warfare. You carry peace born from pressure. You carry authority sealed through isolation. You were tested, you were stretched, you were attacked, and you did not collapse. You ascended. This is the ninth mark, the realization. Too late to control, too late to redefine, too late to diminish, because you have already stepped into your assignment. And once the chosen steps into alignment, there is no demotion, only expansion. Stand firm. Do not shrink now. Do not downplay now. Do not apologize now. You are not arrogant. You are aligned. You are not lucky. You are appointed. You are not surviving. You are governing. And if this message confirms what you have been feeling, then do not stay silent. Comment the number 9 if you know your frequency has shifted. Let the atmosphere know you recognize the moment. Subscribe if you are ready to continue walking in this authority, because this is not the end of your elevation. It is the beginning of your reign. You were never ordinary. You were never overlooked by heaven. You were being prepared, chosen, protected, positioned, and nothing formed against you will overturn what has already been established. You are chosen, and now they know it.